My name's John Green and I want to tell you my top 5 biggest mistakes in recording music. And I know you might be thinking, Johnny, but your music, it's so loud. What could possibly be wrong with what you've been doing? Alright, so for too many years and for too long I've been doing this. Not anymore, but up until about let's just say a year or two ago, maybe even a year ago, my top 5 biggest mistakes in recording music. Number 1 is that my mixes were very, very long because they were very indulgent, and I was so excited to record music that I would sometimes make a mix 6.5 minutes, 7 minutes, 8 minutes long. I was not a stranger to recording songs that were 9 minutes, 10 minutes, even up to 12 minutes, I think, was not unusual. And then what I would do is that I'd record like a whole big long 12-minute mix or 15-minute mix and then chop out the part I thought was the best, but even then the mix was too long. And I guess, I got an idea about that when the group I was in was featured playing a dub reggae tune on a compilation CD put together by Casino from Brisbane. Not a Casino, the person who is called Casino, Jason. He put together a CD called the 4-Element Effect, and it was about hip-hop, 4 elements, graffiti, music, fashion, and 4 elements? I guess lyrics, I think. Were they the 4 elements? I know breakdancing is one of them. Oh, maybe dancing. Alright, so, okay. I had a song on that compilation, and it was 5 minutes 10 or something like that. It was over 5 minutes long. And the people who were putting together the compilation knew full well that everyone in Brisbane wanted to have a song on that compilation. And our song being over 5 minutes long actually reduced the number of people who could be on the CD. So the CD itself could only feature a certain number of people because of our 5-minute song. Maybe there could have been another song that someone else had in there. It only needed to be 3.5 minutes. Alright. Personally, I think a 3 to 4 minute song, 4 minutes already getting a bit long, 4.5 minutes, and I think you've pretty much said all you want to say. I'm not talking about dance music or music that blends into other music. That may progress for quite long. But when I'm talking about songs, I mean, songs that have a definite beginning, middle, and end. Songs that have choruses, songs that have verses. Those things should be under 4 minutes if you want to get any radio play. And I used to work on the radio, so I know that. And then therefore, even shorter than that, 2 to 3.5 minutes, that might be more ideal. Just keep that in mind when you're making your next remix or whatever. It can be as long as you want it to be, but the shorter it is, the more likely it is to get played, and the shorter it is, the more likely it is that people listen from the start of the song to the end of the song. And that's good for your YouTube views. My second big mistake that I made, was everything was too loud. I know that sounds weird, and you had the loudness wars, and I was definitely suckered into that, the idea that music had to be louder than everyone else's music. Your music had to be the loudest. And because in the past, I'd made drum and bass, and done that for a few years, and for some reason, the mentality of drum and bass, that it had to be aggressive and hit you in the guts and all that kind of stuff, that kind of thing had to fall away to be more experimental and letting the music guide the direction of the song. I didn't always have to be full on. I knew a drummer in Brisbane who played as hard as he could from the start of the set to the end of the set. And when I said to him that it would be better if you played a little softer in the verses so you could play harder in the choruses, he thought I was crazy, and he said, I'm a drummer, I want to play as loud as I can all the time. And then so if you don't have dynamics, my music in the past, especially the dub, was just big basses, really, really loud. And then drums, keys, but the bass was always overwhelming and too loud, and really from start to finish. If it's too loud, you kind of get the general sense of a tune, but then you never sort of go into it, because it never sort of suckers you in by going like quieter, and then making you want to listen closer, and then getting louder again and going down again and up. You know, like we need the dimensional play within the song, so it actually sounds cool. In hip hop, I know that people want to have like the hardest possible kick drum from start to finish, and that's totally alright. That's a genre specific thing, but at the same time you're still going to have breaks where the drums drop out, and then the overall volume is going to come down, and then when it's time for the beat to kick back in, then you could bring back all the full volume in the bottom end. What I was doing was I was just recording as loud as I could from the start of the song to the end of the song, and you couldn't really see the dynamics. I was dropping things out, but still it was so loud that even when you looked at the sound wave, it still looked like a giant poop. Mistake number 3 for me was that I was using Roland gear at the beginning, and I was quantizing everything to 1/16, occasionally 1/32, and one of my friends, a DJ called Fib, he said that he always recorded music on 30 seconds, quantize 32, 32, so that you couldn't hear that a human was playing it. So you could hear a human was playing it. By the time you quantize to 16ths, it sounds more rigid and more solid, and you can't really go wrong, but at the same time the beat doesn't have a human element to move back and forth. And things like percussion should always be moving, I say, in the rhythm and out the rhythm, the front of the rhythm, the back of the rhythm, to shuffle and move that big fat 808 kick or whatever you've got, to move it sort of back and forth, side to side with percussion. And if you quantize everything to 16ths, it might still sound like a cool tune to you, but it is also going to sound quite robotic and quite stilted, or quite kind of on the numbers all the time, to a point where it might even sound like you're playing presets off your device. And like I said, I used Roland gear for a long time. I had the 303, the 505. I had the other thing that was called a 202. Was that the sampler? Yeah, I had a few different bits and pieces. I went back and forth, but for many years I used Roland gear, and I always quantized at 1/16. And it's not necessary to always quantize. Even if you play like a bass line or something, you might not want to quantize something like that, because you want it to go a little back and forth over the rhythm. It's up to you, of course, but 1/16 quantizing on everything is going to make your music sound flat. My fourth biggest musical sin is thinking my bass line was so good. Thinking my bass line was so good that I would wait for the drop for like a minute and a half. In one of my really long mixes, I frustrated myself by waiting 3 minutes for the bass drop. The bass drop, for me, of course everyone's different, the bass drop should happen pretty soon in a song, so you know this is a reason to keep listening. and the bass should drop within 15 seconds to 30 seconds. 15 seconds to 30 seconds. If you're waiting for the bass drop a minute into the tune, it better have been the best bass drop you've ever heard, because most people aren't listening for a minute into a build-up. You know, like they got other things to do. They're checking their Instagram. They're like, you know, liking things on Facebook and whatever. A minute and a half is way too long for someone to wait for this bass drop to finally come. Anyway, you know, like 15 seconds is like, I think it's like 8 bars. Depends what the tempo is, of course. 30 seconds is okay, but you got to build that thing up. So by the time you reach that 30-second mark, then everything kicks off, and people love it. You know, if you want your songs to be popular, if you want music to be popular, it's got to get people within 15 seconds to 30 seconds. And you know, listen to your favorite pop songs, and you will notice that they definitely will drop the best bits really quick, really soon, or at least they'll give you enough to keep you following it until they give you the chorus. And like Bon Jovi said, don't bore us, get to the chorus. Alright, so don't wait for your bass line to drop 2 minutes into a song. No one's listening anymore. And number 5, my last one. I did not EQ. What was that? I don't know. What would you call that? Would you call that punk? Would you call that avant-garde? I didn't EQ enough. What I was doing was I was adding EQ, as in making the hi-hats higher, sharper, more shrill, more tinny, because I was really looking for that sharp sound. What I didn't realize was that I wasn't using studio monitors, hi-fi speakers, and they accentuated the mids so much that by the time I turned up the tops so that they were clearer than the mids, so to speak, by the time you play it on a normal device or on a phone or through your PC, the EQ sounds completely wrong. Completely wrong. So now I have real monitors. I spent 500 euros on buying awesome ESI monitors, and they're only 5 inches, but they're awesome for what I need. Let's give you a quick look. That's them. I use them all the time, as in non-stop. Oh, okay. And I wasn't EQing, and when you ask what the hell were you supposed to be EQing, practically every track needs to be tightened up a little. You know, like take off the very, very bottom of most things that aren't bassy to begin with. Take off the bottom EQ of your hi-hats. Take off the low EQ even of your snare. Take off the low EQ of other things, even like maybe your keys or pads, to a point, up to about, you know, like say 100, up to say 50 to 100 hertz. So you could roll off the bottoms. You could even do more. It's up to you. So that there's no bass being played from, I mean real bass, sub bass, low bass, you know, 100 hertz and lower. Take that stuff away. And then by the time you do put a kick drum in, and then by the time you do put a sub in, all of that space will be ready to accept the bass that's been carved out for it. You can do the same thing with other elements. So you can sort of carve out a piece of the keys or something so the vocal sits in better. By learning to EQ properly, you're going to find that every instrument has a place, and the place for that instrument is going to be found by using EQ and pan. Of course, people want to use all the plugins, and I mean, you know, like I enjoy using plugins and things too, but what you really, really got to get right is to EQ each instrument, not in solo, but as a complete thing, but at each instrument does need to have the bass attenuated. Take the very, very sub bass off most instruments. Even the sub bass itself, I would only go to 20 hertz. You don't need to be recording or making sounds below 20 hertz. It's not even necessary. You can even go 30 hertz. 30 hertz, 20 hertz, and then nothing whatsoever. It will reproduce your bass bigger and fatter. I should have been doing this years ago. I should have been marking out place for each instrument with my EQs, but what I was doing was I was letting my mixer compress my drums and my bass, and then by the time that I went to mix it myself, I couldn't really EQ the kick drum and the bass properly because they had already been compressed, whereas this is the kind of thing I would rather do before compression. And EQing correctly is the difference between being able to play your song everywhere or only being able to play your song in your studio and nowhere else. So EQing properly, it's like the thing I just didn't do for 10 years or something. I was EQing to get more of stuff, more bass, more hats, but I wasn't doing subtractive EQ where you take away the sub of most instruments and maybe you take away the highs. You don't need the highs of a sub. You can take off those sorts of things too. Clever and thinking about the whole mix, not just listening to one instrument at a time. You'll start to make mistakes that way. But if you listen to the whole thing, or you listen to, say, the kick and the bass together as a group and other types of groups, your EQing will get better, because what has to happen is that they have to sound good together, enmeshed. And that can only really happen as if you've given enough time and attention to each channel so that each instrument will fit together with EQ and panning. Alright, it's not a rant. I'm not telling you how to mix. I'm just saying that these are things that I did wrong. There were 5 things that John Green did wrong, and I'm not telling other people that I've got the answers, because it's not really about tricks or anything. But if you've been doing things wrong and someone can help you point that out and recognize what's going on, then I think you'd be a better mixer for it. You're a better producer and a better person overall if you do listen to constructive criticism. And I have needed to absorb some of that constructive criticism. And you know, like for a lot of people, it's difficult to listen to people tell you what you're doing wrong. Okay. My name's John Green. There's a link down below if you'd like to donate $1 or $2. If you donate $20 or so, I'll mix a song for you. It'll be public domain. Anyone will be able to use it, and it'll have your name on it, but it'll be called like Charlie's song or something, and I'll be putting that out if anyone wants to donate. You don't have to donate. I do appreciate it. What I want to do more of is these spoken word videos, and I can do more of that, you know, with a little bit of assistance from the people out there. Thank you for listening. I'll be back next week with some more tips and tricks. Again, I'm not saying I've got the answers, but I can tell you from my mistakes, maybe you can learn something.